flow once more. So let's pick it up from. Let's go back a little bit and do a little bit of review from the two dots. Sumchas Amar B'chulin. So Sumchas argues with one of the aspects of the halacha of the Tanna Kama, and says that Yisrael can only use chulin, Yisrael cannot use truma. Vilu nazir b'yayin leipolik, but he doesn't argue about the nazir case. My timer, efshad mishlaz in Erusra. The answer is you can renege and be shoel on the neder, and if you can undo the nazira, so it is potentially available to the nazir to drink the wine. Yachi trumanami efshad mishlaz. Well, you can do the same thing by truma. Well, he mitchela hadrila tivla. Okay, but then he'll go back to tevel state, and it'll still be unusable, and you have to be able to use it when Shabbos comes. And if even though you undo the truma, it just goes back to its unseparated state. Then you haven't accomplished anything. Well, that's not true. You can still be marfish truma from another place. Well, no, we don't like that. We don't want you to do that because of the potential problems of it not working out. If you don't see the truma, if it's from another place and you're being marfish all of this against that, that's not going to work. Well, then fine. Then don't do it from another place. Let's live for shalom and ebay. Let's separate it from it itself internally, right here, right now. Take off a little amount for truma, and the rest will be edible to you. And therefore, it should be no different than nazir. The last base shura. Well, if it's exactly the amount of what you need, 2 sudas, if you take a little bit off, then you don't have the shear that's edible to you, and then therefore we're talking about a situation where it was exact in its amount, and you couldn't go 1 inch, 1 iota less, not 1 ounce less of food, and that's the case where you cannot take, you cannot be a Yisrael and have truma be your eruv. Well, my pasuk, that seems very arbitrary. Why would you see fit to learn specifically that dafka, that kind of case? So what kind of deal is that? So that's where we ended off. Do we do all the Rashis till that point? I think, I think we did, right? So I think we're up to Elos Sumchas. Okay, fine. So right now we're stuck, because right now the scenario that presents itself is that there really no fundamental difference between the Truma case and the Nazir case, and both should be either good or not good. If you're into the Shoel aspect and undoing the aspect, then you can undo both. And if you can undo both, the idea that you're going to tell me the Truma case is specifically a case with an exact amount, and if you showed an eder and retook the Truma, it would come on. That's not really plausible. So Ella Sumchas here. We do.
Yeah, I think we stopped at the.
Las Bashura. Okay, fine. Let's Bashura Rashi. Shemozam Beisudas Misum Samos Hiniach. He left exactly 2 meals worth. Without any leeway. And if you take even the smallest amount of truma, you're going to be lacking the amount you need for the eruv, and that's obviously not acceptable. Well, the case is that, right, there was no amount. So that's Rashi just explained the last attempted answer. But to come back to that, it was my pasuk bitmiya. I mean, claim my high terutza. What kind of answer is it that was the unique scenario of the chipaska tanal nulsei the ein adam nosen ruva ela b'tzimtzum? What is there some kind of a basic rule that people don't only take the exact amount of the eruv and there's no leeway, no little extra? They're not got stam and mulsei that you would picks an arbitrary type of random situation to represent your basic halacha. It doesn't make sense to do it that way. If there's some kind of basic pattern, it's one thing, but if it's a rare kind of occurrence, it's exactly the amount for the 2 sudas, and that's what you're going to tell me as a basic halacha, that does not seem to hold water. So we're stuck right now, so you have to come up with another answer. And the answer is back to the Gemara. So, Elasumcha Savala, slightly below the middle of the page. Elasumcha Savala Krabana, the Amre, Kol Davishu Mishum Shvus, Gozolov Ben Hashmashos. The answer is that anything that is of a rabbinic prohibition, like taking Truma, doesn't really start when Shabbos hits. He holds like the Rabbanon who say it starts even when Ben Hashmoshos hits. And Ben Hashmoshos is the exact same time that the Erev has to be acceptable. So if at the time that the Erev is acceptable, you can no longer do what you need to do because it's a Shvus, and a Shvus is also from Ben Hashmoshos, well then you're stuck. That's why you cannot rectify this truma, because the only way to rectify it is to undo it and redo it by taking new truma against this and making it to chulin, making 99% of it chulin. Well, that's all fine and dandy, except you're not allowed to do that on Ben Hashmoshos. Goes off Ben Hashmoshos, that's prohibited on Ben Hashmoshos just like it would be prohibited on Shabbos. Vagbos truma shvusu. Taking truma is indeed a rabbinic prohibition. The kivanim ikara like tikna, since you didn't rectify it earlier, you want to say, you can say, well, it's fitting. How at the time of the Erev, you can say it's fitting. How would it be fitting at the time that the Erev connects and then becomes valid? It would be the shehi. Okay, you would renege on your truma wherever you are and wherever the truma is. And you'd revert it back to its tevel state, and then vadar amat truma b'tzafin shaba ma'isrisha b'joyim kulam. And then you would, in that very, theoretically, in that very same period of time, you would be shoal on the old truma that you did on the entire thing. You'd have this back to tevel. You'd redo it again with a small percentage going to the truma and the meiser, rectifying it to make the rest chulin, rendering you a valid erev. Well, v'chein kulam. Then that's what you would do with the rest of the different nesinas which you have to give, the trumas and meiser, etc. So all of these things would be done, almost simultaneously, right by ben hashmashos. Well, it became a sakle ben hashmashos. Okay, but that doesn't work because you're going to be misakin ben hashmashos to cover a shvus, and you're going to be transgressing a shvus. Uknias erev kishazeh nichnaz v'zeh yotzei, and you'll be trying to acquire an erev when this one comes in and this one goes out, meaning Friday goes in and Shabbos comes in and Friday goes out. That would not be acceptable. You'll not be able to do that. Therefore, since you cannot do it halachically, it would not be acceptable because you hold like the Rabbanon who say that all shvusim are already they're already engaged halachically already from Ben Hashmashos. So that's the difference. The only problem is, let's move over to Tosis for a second, right? Elos Sumchis. V'im Tomar, or the question Michael I think sort of raises, Elos Sumchas Savalak Rabbanon, right? So you want to answer that, well, you can't take Truma anymore because the key moment is the time that the Erev gets turned on. The Erev gets turned on during Ben Hashmashos, so what's the deal? So Avim Tomar Tosa says right there on the side, Mehai time and Ami Nazil O Yarev. Why is Nazir any different? You shouldn't make an Erev with a Yayin either. Right? Isn't it prohibited to go to a chacham on Shabbos to be shol on your neder? That's also a problem. It's like making a bez. You don't engage a bezdin on Shabbos. So if that's the problem, and it's the time frame that this has to happen, the time frame is not an acceptable one. You got to be consistent. Can I read on Perek Mishichdach? Ve'shleimar, the Tosas answers the l'tzorach Shabbos nish'olin, that you are allowed to ask a chacham to be shol your neder if it's a l'tzorach Shabbos, because I'm reading Hassam, like we say there. So even though there are cases of truma, that's when you don't have any food by truma. But here, I guess that's not. It also would be a rare case that you have no other food, that you have to eat after this food. That would not be the standard situation. But to have wine for Nazir, because who right now cannot have any wine, right? It's not this one you can have. You can have any wine. So to be shol on your neder, v'hai have yitzorach Shabbos sheyamut lishos yain b'Shabbos. But this Nazir, for him to retract his neder and to be shol on his neder would be considered dvar mitzvah if his purpose is to drink wine on Shabbos, which is a mitzvah, okay? And therefore, there's a fundamental difference between the truma and between the nazir. Okay, that takes care of that.
So we're saying that the Erev is nikne at the time that one goes in and one goes out. Friday goes out and Shabbos goes in. And that by definition, that's Ben Hashmashos. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, and that Ben Ishmashos, according to the Rabbanon, does not allow you to because there are men, right? We say Iraftim, we say that there are certain things that are mutter Ben Ishmashos. That the Rabbanon were more lenient about Ben Ishmashos than they were during the rest of Shabbos. But if you're like this Rabbanon who say it's no different, that all of these rabbinic prohibitions will actually start going into effect already Ben Ishmashos, then there's no leeway where you can pull this off. There's no.
Don't you have an added problem with the Nazir, though, using that example? Because he's not allowed to drink wine, if I remember correctly, until he has the water from the Parah Duma. And that's why he can't be a Nazir today, because there is no wine from the Parah Duma. So this Nazir here can't let go of his vow, and you can't be.
No, you can't. What do you mean? You can't let go. You can retroactively undo it, so you can make yourself no longer a Nazir. You were never a Nazir. In other words, you're not going through the carbon process. You're going through the process of nullifying it from the get-go to allow you to have not been a Nazir. So, right? So
So you can do that.
yeah.
You could be a Nazir today and then go for whatever number of days, and then before it finishes, you could ask someone to nullify it.
Well,
You'd have Nazir.
I think Nazirs does apply. I think you could technically be a Nazir today if you actually made such an eder. I mean, you're raising the point that the process of the end game can't be done today. I'm not sure, but that's an interesting question. Does that lack of end game prevent you from becoming a Nazir in the first place? I didn't think it did, but could be right. Could be there's a technicality that because you can't finish the process, then.
But this Nazir here would have to say, well.
Yeah, but here that's right. But that's not the issue here. We're talking about a situation where let's say you could finish it when you became clearly you could become a Nazir in our case. That's obviously the case where Naziris works. But the way you do it for Shabbos is that you can undo it during Ben Hashmashos. Since you could be, it's all could. You don't have to actually do it, but since you could be Shol and Yineder, and if you were, that would be considered Dvar Mitzvah. So it's possible, it's mutter to be done. So then it becomes accessible to you and it's okay. Fine. So let's go weiter. Kaman Azla. Okay, so continuing in the Gemara. Kaman Azla Hadatan. Who does it go like that? That which we learned in the Mishnah. Yesha Amru Akol Fi Mashu Adam. Okay, there are those who say that it all goes by the subjective nature of who the person is. And what his dimensions are and what his situation is, that it's not objective in terms of standard, but it goes by the person himself who's performing whatever it is that you're talking about. For example, Mole Kumsa Mincha. Okay, so in other words, when you talk about taking the full kaimet's worth, which is like quasi handful, where you take the 3 fingers and you use the top thumb and the bottom pinky to wipe the flour away, and whatever is left in the middle 3 fingers, well, is it a standard amount of what a typical 3 fingers would be, or is it what this kayan's 3 fingers can handle? Okay, Yeshamru Hakol Fi Mashu Adam Molikum Mincha Umali Chafnaf Ketares. When you bring the Ketares on Yom Kippur, you bring 2 handfuls. So again, is it objective? So we're saying no, it's his Moli Chafnaf. To drink a mouthful of liquid on Yom Kippur, that also is subjective. The amount that you have to drink is subjective to who you are drinking this amount. Umazon shtei sudos erev, and the same thing by mazon shtei sudos. We have the shear. The measure is 2 sudas worth, but who's 2 sudas worth? Some gluttonous guy who has to pack away, or a sick person who just needs a little bit of food and he's already full. So this Mishnah, this Brisa seems to be saying that actually it's a Mishnah seems to be saying that that we go subjectively. We don't look at this from an objective point of view. So Kaman, okay, who is this like? Amr of Zera Sumchasi Lo Amay the Chazlei Be'inon. Okay, it's Sumchis. He's the one who holds this way because he goes by what is fit for him. And he goes on record that we view it subjectively, and therefore that would be the opinion. Okay. My dechazile be'inon. Okay, let's see any Rashis here. Yesh Amru, yeah, let's do the Rashis here. Yesh Amru, Yesh Dvarim Sh'Amru Chacham Shura Lefi Mashu Adam. Vein Shur and Shava B'Kol. There are certain things in halacha that the rabbi said the way you measure it is based on the subjective person who's doing it, and it varies person to person, as opposed to saying there's a standard amount which is universal, and we don't care about your particular situation. For example, offering the incense on Yom Kippur, which the Kohen Gadol does. Okay, that's no other Rashis. Okay, okay. I mean, the word "ma'idachazle be'inon," I guess, in other words, is really that's a sumcha's position. He doesn't use those words. I don't remember him using those words. But it's, in other words, we're interpreting sumchas that just like he says, you cannot use truma for a kohen because it's not fit for him. If you're a Yisrael, you have to use chulin. You cannot use truma because you need things fitting to him. So it's not objective as it's fitting for somebody, but it's subjective. So he takes that same principle and now adapts it in the reverse kind of way, and says that you can also use smaller amounts based on this subjective nature of what you're dealing with. Just like sumchas by Yisrael looks at subjectively that he says he needs to be able to eat from the truma, and since following that line of reasoning, that's why that would fit into sumchas, as opposed to the chachamim who would say no, anybody, as long as it's fit for somebody, it's good enough. I don't look at him; I look at the universal world and says somebody can eat this, and that's good enough. Okay. Lema pliga, back to the Gemara. Lema pliga ad Reb Shimon Elazar. Let's say that this position that it goes subjectively seems to argue with Reb Shimon Elazar. The Tanya Reb Shimon Elazar Eimeh ma'arvin l'chayil zakein kedei mizayna. That when you make an error for a sick person or an elderly person, it goes based on his amount, his allotment of food. Or ravasam mesudas beinis. But when it comes to the gluttonous guy. Then we don't. We look at it as a standard Suda. So the Lakula will go lower, but we won't go higher by saying this guy not, doesn't have any meal less than 6 steaks. So for him, he's going to have to really have a lot of food for his Eruv. We don't say that. Okay, Ularavas and Besudas Beina Shel Kaladam. When it comes to a gluttonous fellow, it's like the standard person. So it seems that Sumchas then would argue with Shimon Elazar. Right? He argues with him because Shimon Elazar says that we don't go by his subjective nature of this guy. So Gemara says, Targuma achayla v'zakein. You can learn it referring that the subjective aspect taka works, and it could agree with Shimon Elazar as it relates to chol and zakein. So if anything, no, you can argue that the two things are aligned. The two opinions are aligned. What do you do with the gluttonous guy? By the gluttonous guy, it's not aligned. But you can argue that the ravenous guy who never gets full, he's an unusual guy. Okay, he doesn't work. I guess I haven't seen us at Kiddushes, but Lamaisa, he's not considered a standard guy, and therefore his eating habits are nullified to the eating habits of the average person. If if a person's sick or a person's old, well, that's standard for those type of people. You wouldn't say batladaita, but for a guy who's just off the charts, always hungry and eats a tremendous amount, that's a different story, and we would nullify his das. So in reality, you really could align the Rabbanon, this Sumchas with Reb Shimon Elazar. You would not necessarily have to say that they argue. Let's do Rashi. Terguma lahai decholi shura badam atzmo achola v'zakein ulukula. No, this concept, the lahaida tali, not the chali, lahaida tali shur ba'adam atzmo, that concept Now, learn that concept that you rely on the subjective person you're dealing with as opposed to an objective amount. Okay, that you can apply that principle to the sick person and to the elderly person. Ulakula, and you can rely on it to be lenient, to say I don't need such a big amount. V'yaravasan ulachumra, but you don't apply it to the ravenous guy and be machmir to say he needs that amount that everybody that would make him comfortable, which is way more than everybody else. Why not the butler daita? Could you say his mind is nullified, his das is nullified? We don't go after some strange subjective guy. Okay, so we're good, and we've got a lot of different opinions, but basically everything seems to line up. At least things are consistent here. Okay, very good. So now we're ready for the next halacha of the Mishnah. The next halacha is, and it seemed like it was universal halacha, that you are allowed to put an Eruv for a kohen in a beis hapras. If the kohen wants to make an Eruv, he can make it put it in a beis hapras, which is a field where a corpse was buried somewhere, and you're afraid that the plow took it all over the place. So how could a kohen walk there when you get big bones, pieces all over the place? That would render him tamei. He can't do that. Well, Rabbi Yehuda went further, and he said even in a basic forest. Okay, so we're going to get to both these opinions. Right now, let's start with the first one, and that is the kohen in the beis hapras. So, Rabbi Yehuda Afa basic forest. What was this? No, I'm sorry. Well, the kohen beis hapras. The Amar of Yehuda Mashmuel. The reason why it's considered accessible to a kohen, okay, if you're a kohen and you want to put an Eruv in a beis hapras, how are you going to be able to access your beis hapras? Because Amar of Yehuda Mashmuel menafech adam beis hapras v'holech. Okay, because a kohen can blow slowly but surely as you proceed, like you like that marine looking for the mines on your stomach, going through the field. If you do that same thing looking for the bones, and you blow the grass away as you go, you literally can see if there's anything on the field that would contaminate you. Since you see that there, as you proceed, you can see that there isn't anything there, then you can go. And if there is something there, then you go around it. But the bottom line is, it could be done. So you could access this Eruv in a beis hapras, and therefore it's good. And he adds one other halacha, that once the beis hapras gets trampled upon, and after the plowing, it gets trampled upon by people. So all of a sudden, you make a nice big kiddush there, and everybody comes onto the field for the kiddush, and then after that you can go there if you're a kohen, because you can assume by this point, once people traversed there and walked all over the field, that the bones are already in the ground, no longer representing any possible negia of the bones. It's not big enough for an ohel. You're not worried about an ohel situation. You're worried just only about a negia situation of touching that bone. Chances are it's already in the ground, and you're not going to come to touch it. Okay, let's take a look at Rashi. Minafech adam beis hapras sada shnechrash bo kever. Okay, if you have a field where a graveside or grave was buried, was somebody was buried there, and the grave was plowed. Shnechrash bo kever the kula sveika mishum atzmasu. The entire doubt is about the bones. That someone's bloy basar and a metama boel. Right, bones without any meat, any flesh, will not be able to contaminate bo'el with the concept of going over it and just becoming tamei because you're in the same airspace. That does not work by bones. It needs a real part of the body intact, and that's not happening here. Okay, im yeshem etzem gadol nir me'elav. Okay, when you blow as you're before you walk down that area, you blow in the grass, and you see what's between the blades of the grass. You'll see if there's a big bone. You'll see it near me'elav. The etzem cut near Again, I mean, right, sorry, that you'll see anyway. There's a big bone you'll see without the blowing of the grass. If Yeshem had some gadol nira me'elav, that you'll see anyway. If you had some cut nira beneficha, and the small bone you'll see as you blow the grass away, vena mesito bragav, you'll not touch it with your feet. So you have a nice way of protecting yourself from becoming tamei by going through the field very slowly and very meticulously, and you'll make sure that nothing happens. So it's shayach. And then once we talk about a beis hapras, I guess we feel compelled to mention one other halacha regarding a beis hapras, and that is once it's been trampled upon, it's valid b'drisas raglei b'nei adam, b'drisas raglei b'nei adam, by the walking of the feet and the pressing of the feet onto the ground. Then everything goes into the ground, and you're good to go. Okay. Okay, so interesting. Okay, so well, I just quickly glanced at it because it sort of was bothering me a little bit. I think he told us just on the other point of the chol hazokein. In other words, if you hold, right, because the Rabbanan who argue with some, because they seem to be more lenient, right? They're back to the issue of the sick person and the elderly person, right? The Rabbanan held you don't even have to be fit as long as it's fit for somebody. So they're more lenient, right? They say that they argue by the Nazir, they argue by the Yisrael, by Truma. So why can't they agree also by Chol Hazak? Why is the Chol Hazak going to have to be unique to Simchas? Why can't it also be the first opinion? And he says, which really seems to be from the, I think he says this just very quickly, but it seems that in other words, if you hold that somebody has to be accessible, not you. It's not about you. It's that somebody can eat it, like the Truma case where the Kohen can eat it. Well, then that's more. Then clearly your philosophy is you're an objective person. Somebody out there. If it's somebody out there, and just because you happen to be sick or elderly, we're not going to change the rules for you. So it comes out really that concept of looking at it subjectively in could be a machmir in one way and be a kula in the other way. It's not consistently machmir, but the Rabbanan really wouldn't buy into that concept. They would say even a sick person or an elderly person, you go by the objective meal, and even though it's not necessarily so clear that they would hold that way, but that's what seems from the Gemara, that the Rabbanan of Sumchas would not buy into this concept of making it a smaller meal, because they're more into the global view, and if you're into the global view, it's got to be one standard amount, and it wouldn't get smaller just because you're dealing with an elderly person. Okay, so that's what I think I gleaned from Tosas. Okay, so let's proceed. Tanam Neshiachal Rabbi Yehuda Omer Afa basic verse. The next halach is that even in a cemetery, forget about a beis hapras, okay, which is one issue, which technically you have an allowance to go through the beis hapras very slowly, but even in a basic forest, which a kohen has no business going into, how does a kohen go into a cemetery? Right? So how does that work? And the answer is because you could go in a box and you can make yourself a nice little a carriage and go through there, and that will prevent you from becoming tamei. Tana, okay, we learned in the Bryce. You could create a chatzitza for yourself, like cars nowadays, where they argue if you're in a car, you're protected, and if you're a kohen, if you're driving over a cemetery, don't worry about it because you're not exposed. So if you go in a box, then you're good to go. Okay, so Kosovar, what does this Tana hold? If Rabbi Yehuda holds that you can go in a box, and that will prevent you from becoming tamei, even as you pass through a cemetery, must be kosavar oyels zeroik shmei oyel, that a movable ohel, that in other words, if you are in a tent that is moving, like in this box, in this carriage, and you're traveling through the cemetery, that's called an ohel, that's called a separation, that's called its own tent, and it separates you. And they argue with the same issue as these Tanoim argue about. The Tanya, as we learned the Brisa, if a person goes into, a kohen goes into the other nations of the world in such a box, okay, what's halacha? Rebbe metame, Rabbi Yosef Yehuda metayer. Rebbe says you're tamei because bottom line is nowadays, again, this is not relevant for us, but they decree tumah on the other nations. because things were very, I guess, all willy-nilly with the corpses there. So if you walk into Sudan or whatever other places out there in the world, you're going to become tamei because they made a gezerah, rabbinic gezerah, that these lands are considered tamei. Okay, and the fact that you walked in there with a carriage wouldn't change anything. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda Matayr. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda says, no, you're tar if you travel in a carriage, in a box, or in some kind of a chest. My kamifli, what's the machlokas? Ma'asavar oil zrok lav shmei oil, ma'asavar oil zrok shmei oil. Okay, movable tents are considered a tent, or they're not considered a tent, is the issue that we're dealing with here. Let's catch up in the Rashis. Oil zarok. Okay, 2 lines before it gets wide. Oil zarok, oil hamataltel. It's a movable oil. So you're covered, you're surrounded, but you're moving. One says shmei oil. It's called its own tent for chotzeitz, and it serves as a chatzitza. It separates you from the tumah, between you and the tumah. And let's say this segues into this issue that we have in the Brisa. Eretz Amim Mitama Bo'el. So Rabbana were actually geyser, amazing chumrah, that if you go to a foreign nation, that walking in and just being in the airspace of those places makes you Tamas Ohel. So I guess they really wanted to discourage you from going in there.
You're not tamei by itself, and the ohel is the only thing that could protect you.
No, what do you mean?
We're talking about that it's mitama tumas ohel.
Mitama ba'ohel. Eretz ha'amim mitama ba'ohel. Right? In other words,
in other words, you have to walk into a building.
That's what it seems. In other words, if you're in a situation where you're covered, mitama ba'ohel. Okay. Yeah, it seems that way. Or you can say, but now just means that we deem everything to go straight up. I mean, Tumas Oil generally goes up. Yeah, I'm not sure. In other words, I read it originally. I'm not sure. You can read it one and two. Either Tumas Oil applies, which means that everywhere that you are in a foreign land, the Tumas shoots up like any oil. So if you're mile over it, okay, then you become tamei. Or you can read it the other way, the way you were inclined to read it, that if you're in a OL, I don't see the logic of that if you're in a OL, then you become tamei. Well, that same rule should apply if you go over it. You're also tamei. Okay, I'm not sure, but my guess would be the first way. But either way, there's a special gzeira that if you're in a foreign land, you're tamei. However, if you go into a foreign land with a shida, rakeves noshim, agala suya kufsa, it's like these wagons for women on wheels that was made like a box, migdal mishtayer, like some kind of a chest or whatever. Okay, so what's the underpinning of the machlokas between whether or not if you go into a foreign land in this carriage, are you tamei or not? It's based on oil zrok lav shmei oil. One says if it's a movable tent, it's not called a tent. V'chosh ein oil ein a chotzeis. If it's not a separate tent, it cannot serve as a partition for you between you and the corpses underneath you. The other one says no, shmei oil the chotzeis. Okay, and it separates you. V'gdola skinon, and it's got to be it can't be a small carriage, a tiny carriage that you can barely fit into. Okay, we're not talking about one of these Houdini things. Okay, we're talking about a gdola skinon, talking about a big one. Shemachzekes memsa belach shem kraim biyavish. It's got to be able to maintain 40 saws like a mikveh. It's got to be as big as a mikveh, or 2 cores of dry measure. The ketana kulihai umekabelas tumah, because if it's very small and it doesn't have that size that we're looking for, it's viewed as a kli, it's viewed as a utensil as opposed to something bigger than a utensil. Mekabel's tumah v'chaitza, and it will be able to become tummy itself. And if it can become tummy itself, it certainly can't be a partition between you and the tumah. That cannot work. So it's got to be something that's viewed bigger than a movable item.
The difference between a kli and a carriage or something, what is that? I mean, what is a kli then? What is a kli?
A kli is more that you can take it with your hand and you can pick it up and move it.
Okay, but you can't. How are you going to fit into I mean,
Would you call a car a kli, or is a car a
I don't know. I'm just
utensil?
trying to figure out how
Right,
you-
so a car would not be considered a utensil because you can't pick it up and use it. It's not. It's too big.
You
It's,
got like these little cars. That, like,
so it depends. So if it's a shear of a mikveh, that's the
shear of a minute.
right, the 40 saw. So
The amount of water to make the whole, minimum amount of water you need to make it.
So does it mean actually the expanse of
Yeah.
it? So if it's the size of a mikveh and it's like a car, then that's the dividing line.
right,
Nothing less.
right. I mean, a car is probably bigger than a mikveh, but your mikveh doesn't have. But right, a mikveh needs to hold basically the area of a body. Like we said, the 40 saw pretty much covers your body. There's got to be that. If you have to curl up in it, like a, like a small box, like I guess one of these Houdini boxes where you're chopping, the box up in 20 pieces, then that that would be a.
So suppose somebody carried you in a coffin. Is a coffin?
You have to measure. You have to measure it. No, I think a coffin sounds like that would be fine because you don't have to curl up to be in a coffin. You prostrate, and there's room to spare. So the shear we said, remember you said 1 amma by 1 amma by 1 amma,
Yeah.
the shear of a human being, that's the shear of a mikveh. Okay, the 40 saws measures that. So if it's straight, if a person could be straight up like that, then that would be enough to get out of that kli category. Okay. Yeah.
Wheels in the coffin and then can wheel you into the cemetery.
Okay. Now, sounds like a spy movie. Okay, so he says, Rabbanon Masis and Krebis Rile, and the Rabbanon of the Mishnah learn like Rebbe, Ubein Rabbi Yehuda, Bein Rabbanon Consumchas Frilu. Okay, Krebis Frilu, because they say that Rebbe hold that it's metame, and therefore will not separate you, and that's why the basic forest will not work. And either one learn like sumchis. It's got to be fitting for you, right? Because we wouldn't be getting into this conversation if you hold like the original opinion that said the kohen doesn't have to worry about himself because the Yisrael can get to it. Right, so the fact that we're dealing with how does the Kohen going to access this basic kfaris is only in the mindset that he has to, and that's Sumchas's mindset that it's subjective. But if you're in the other mindset that it goes objectively, that somebody's able to access it, so the Kohen can make the Eruv there because Yisrael can access it, and that's good enough. As long as somebody can access it, I don't have to get into it. So Rashi's saying that this whole discussion would be in the world of Sumchas. Okay, let's just Vahada Tanya right back to the Gemara. Okay, last line on the page. Vadatanya, Rabbi Yehuda Eimer. That which Rabbi Yehuda says, Ma'arvin l'kayin tar b'tshuma Torah. Okay, that you're allowed to make an error for a kohen tar with shuma Torah. Bekever heichi azol bekever. Okay, Ma'arvin l'kayin tar b'tshuma Torah bekever. Okay, that this seemingly strange scenario that you're allowed to make an erev for a kohen tar with shuma Torah in a kever. Okay, even though one would argue, Heichi Azol, okay, how is he going to go there? How is he going to access it? It seems like he has to access it. How is he going to do that? B'shida Teva Migdal. Same idea. He can go to the Truma, it's in the basic forest, the Truma, and it's in a kever, and yet it's considered a valid Erev because you can get there in this chest, in this box, in this carriage. The only problem is Vakivan the Achsa Itmalay. But the minute you stick your hand out to pick up the Truma, you're in a basic forest. You got to get it. You have to be able to eat it. So how are you going to eat it if you're in a cemetery? The minute you stick your hand out, the hand's going to become... I'm sorry, before we get to the hand. Once it's sitting there in the basic forest, Itmalay, the food itself will become tamei. So how does a truma stay tahar if it's sitting in a basic forest? And the answer is b'shal huchsharu. Okay, maybe the truma never yet became huchshel kabel tumah. We learned about food that until they come in contact with certain liquids, they cannot receive tumah. So if this food, granted you made it into a food already, but it is food, it's grain or whatever it might be, but it's not yet hukshel kabel tumah, so technically can be sitting in the basic forest and not yet tumah. We'll pick this up tomorrow.